Hey, welcome back to Bridal Sewing Techniques, and today we're going to talk about how to gusset a lace wedding gown. Are you someone who has experience with a mix of sewing but is looking to get into the bridal niche? This channel is for you. So sometimes a gown is way too small. It's much too small to let out using just the seam allowances, and then you have to gusset the gown. So a gusset is kind of like adding extra fabric to it to make it fit. So that's what we're going to talk about today. This gown is a beautiful Monique Lhuillier gown. I love her gowns. And it's a super light gown. You'll see it's a couple of layers of a pretty sheer chiffon actually. You can really kind of see through it. So I'm glad they put a couple layers there. And then there's the outer lace overlay that's French lace. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you can see it. So this bride came in needing her gown sized up quite a bit, and even the front panels that cover the bust area, they're not even anywhere near wide enough. So I had to gusset the bust area as well. But this part that I'm gesturing to along the side seam is actually what we're going to be gusseting. So basically, like I said before, a gusset is kind of like a strip of fabric that we're going to put in there to make the dress bigger. But, I know right now you're probably thinking, okay, I learned what that is and I'm going to hop off now and try it. But there's some extra details that are included in this video that I would love to see you hang around for. The most important thing is how I'm going to work in the top of the gusset so that it looks beautiful and completely natural and original to the dress. That's going to take a little bit of fancy footwork, and I'm also going to talk about ways to disguise the gusset so you don't have obvious extra seams going down the sides. And we're also going to get into a little bit of French seams, which I just did a video on French seams. I'm going to link to several videos down below in the video description. So I want you to go down there after you watch this video if you have any questions. So another one I'm going to link to is how to use a razor for sewing. It can save you a lot of time, and there's a lot of special techniques that you can do that can really make it very safe for you. So right now I'm going to peel back the lace overlay that they have done. They've put a little bit of applique work covering the top of the seam. I peeled that back, and then I'm going to open up where these layers of fabric are sewn together. This is the underarm area. So I'm going to open this up and expose the 3 layers. And you'll see that little French seam that I was talking about. It's an itty bitty French seam. Look how tiny it is. You almost have to whisper when you look at it. It's so tiny. So I'm going to open up this seam as long as I need to for where the gown is tight on her. I do not have a before picture that I'm going to put on this video of her underarm area and the side seams because it was so revealing of her bust, and the dress had to be completely open in the back. We could not zip it at all. So that before picture that you saw of just the front of the gown, really the side seams were pulled way forward in the before picture. So it's kind of hard to gauge just how tight this dress was on her. But this is the internet and it's up forever, and I have respect for my brides, and I wouldn't want a picture like that of me. So I didn't put the picture of her with the dress open and revealing the sides on there. So for those of you who ask about that, most of the time when I don't include a before and after, it is out of respect for the bride and her modesty. So here we go. I've opened it up as far down as I need to, and this gusset on her actually goes down to just a little bit above the knee. It's that much extra space she needed. Now here is this chiffon fabric that I was talking about. I don't actually have this exact fabric in stock. I have a knit. And the reason why I've grabbed it is because it has a lovely 4-way stretch. And this bride actually wants this dress to flow more like a tight knit sheath gown. not the loose flowy sheath feeling. So what I've gone for is the general thickness of the fabric is about the same, and the color is exactly the same. So it's going to work, and it's going to allow this dress to be stretchy. Here's some slow-mo cutting here for those of you who love the thrill of cutting fabrics. I know I do. So these are my little scissors, just moving on by. What I'm going to do is her gussets end up being about, I don't know, she needs about 3 inches on each side. So I cut these somewhere around, I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, I'm thinking I cut them about 4.5 inches wide, and then the length that she needed. The reason why I cut them extra is because we're going to put them in with French seams, which gobbles up a little bit. And then, of course, you have to count for your seam allowance. And there at the bottom, where it's kind of that block at the bottom, that's actually going to end up being kind of like a triangle point where we ease it back into the original side seam. Here's the lace that I'm going to use from Gelmore, and I've got that item number listed on there. This is some lace that I had in stock, and man, does it ever match. So it's either the exact lace or there is very, very little difference. So again, though, I would probably prioritize the color matching if you don't have the exact match. And then here I'm gesturing. See these stripes where the lace pattern is a little bit more dense? That's where we're going to want to pull our gussets from. And then here on the ends, that's going to be something that you can cut away to make a nice little lace trim out of that. So I'm not going to really want to get into that if I can avoid. So I'm going to lay these strips down and I'm going to cut them. So now what I have is 4 strips cut in the knit and 2 strips cut in the lace overlay. And I'm going to go ahead and start sewing this. Since these are going to be French seams, again, if you're not familiar with French seams, I just posted a video and I'm going to link to it down below in the video description. But with the French seams, you want very little bit of seam allowance, and you're sewing these wrong sides together so that your first pass is going to put your seam allowance on the outside of the gown, where it would look bad and raggedy if she put the dress on. And then your second pass down it is going to be right sides together, where you enclose that itty bitty seam allowance, and then it's going to be putting that French seam on the inside of the dress. So here I am showing you how it is right now without the second pass. And now I'm going to do the lace. I'm going to do the lace just right sides together. We're not going to do French seams because that would be quite bulky for this lace. We're also going to do exactly what the designer originally did with this dress. This dress, believe it or not, did not have appliques hand sewn over that side seam like we see with a lot of lace overlay gowns that cover the side seam, kind of visually break it up. They did not do that. They had more of like, I'm trying to remember, I think it was just a little over 1/4 of an inch seam allowance that they had in there, and left it raw, and that was just fine. And so they had the visible seam. So we're going to do the same thing with this. If the bride does not tolerate it, like when she puts it on, if the seam is very noticeable, like, hey, why do we have 2 seams going down the side? This doesn't look good. Then that's when I would have the discussion with the bride about, well, we can put the applique work over the seams kind of to camouflage them in. But it actually looks really neat. So I'll show you that in the end, and I'll show you how to do that camouflaging kind of work. So we flipped the dress and got into another spot here, and we're going to work on finishing up these French seams. So here I am with the applique scissors. See how they have the little paddle that keeps you from accidentally cutting the fabric that's on the underside? I'm going to go along this seam allowance and I'm going to trim it super close. That's how you get that itty bitty French seam. The size of your French seam is going to be determined by how close you cut to that first pass. So see how tiny that is? Now I'm going to make my second pass. Again, this one is the right sides together. And like I said, I'm doing this 4 times because I'm doing it on the lining and then I'm doing it on the shell fabric. Here is the after picture. On the left, you can see how the side seams were visible. This bride did not mind it. Now here on the underarm, where I really had to increase the coverage, I'm going to outline here where you can see this is all new fabric or lace applique that has been hand sewn on to add it to the top of the bodice of the dress, to the underarm. And you can see how well that blends in compared to when you look at the side seams that does not have the applique work over it. Again, I think the bride would not have tolerated those side seams being so visible, except for the fact that the dress originally had seams, so it didn't bother her. But if you wanted to cover them up, let's talk about how you would do that. So remember back to those underarms. You would take pieces of applique, that's the lace that you cut out, and you would sew them covering the seams. You would do hand sewing. Again, I'm going to link to how to do that below. I hope this has helped you. Hit that thumbs up button and subscribe. If you've already subscribed, hit the bell and you'll be notified every time I upload a new video. Please leave any questions that you may have down below, and I'll be happy to help out any way I can. Thank you.